Hi there everyone. The first chapter is going to feature double attack, or in other words, the so-called fork. Definitely one of the most popular tactical ideas which you could see in games played by people of any levels. You could find people new to chess trying to use those ideas, and also grandmasters, including world champions, also use the fork. It's not a trap, it's a common tactical motive. You really need to know it, and therefore we wanted to start with it because this is pretty standard and easy to understand idea. Basically what you're trying to do in a fork, I'm sure you all already heard of it, but just in order to do a bit of a recap, you use one of your pieces or a combination of pieces, multiple pieces, to attack two objects at the same time. And while the opponent usually manages to save one of those objects, then he cannot protect the other. Why am I saying objects, not pieces or pawns? Precisely, this does not need to involve only pieces. It can also, you can also have an attack on a piece and the pawn at the same time. Usually the opponent is going to save the piece because it's much more valuable than a pawn. But at the same time, you can also create threat against a piece, and also, for instance, a checkmate threat, or a threat to, for example, get a preferable exchange or achieve some sort of a strategic goal. These examples are, of course, much more complex. At the very beginning, we are going to focus on those most obvious cases where you create two threats, mostly against two pieces. So the first example is actually taken from a game I played a couple of years back. This is 2012, me playing in Polish Championship against Grandmaster Robert Kempinski with black pieces. Well, I had the black pieces, to be precise. And just for the sake of a explanation of this position, black is down a piece, as you see, but at the same time he managed to give a check on the back rank. The white king is not entirely safe. It is restricted both on the back rank and also on the c8 h3 diagonal. On the other hand, there is no check, there is no immediate threat, there is no checkmate at this point. What you need to do is to find a good move for black, and as a general rule, we strongly recommend that you pause the videos at any time you feel necessary, so that you have enough time to calculate everything on your own, and only then double check if you got the correct answer. So I will be telling you where is the right moment to think, and feel free to calculate all of the lines that are necessary there. Use this pause button. After all, these courses, these bootcamps are designed for you. And make sure to pause the video, actually, not just to wait for me to give you the answer, because then you're not going to have the best result possible. Okay, so this is going to be the pattern for all of the videos, all of the examples. Please do remember that. At the same time, if you don't feel comfortable or you just don't feel like calculating that, you may just as well listen to the solutions. So basically, in this case, yes, you need to find a good move for black. Feel free to pause the video if needed. If you already know the answer, you might want to listen to the answer, which is bishop d4. I'm sure you realize that in this particular case, the fact that the black bishop can attack the queen on a7 and also threaten this, well, control the g1 square, which will in turn help black to create a checkmate pattern. Thanks to that, white cannot save the queen. And this is what my opponent missed. After bishop d4, I'm pretty sure he wanted to reply with queen a8. So he assumed that he will be able to exchange the queens, liquidating to a winning position, winning endgame, and just win the game pretty much. Unfortunately for him, after queen a8, black does not need to exchange the queens. Instead, first he goes rook g1 checkmate. This is pretty obvious. So the only move really for white at this point is just to go queen takes d4. If white played something like bishop b7, then that doesn't really help because, well, instead of taking on a7, which obviously leads to nothing because white just takes on c8, first black uses this nice in-between move, which we wanted to play anyway, rook g1 check, and only after king f3, then we play queen g4 check. This is an important detail because right now, of course, the queen is not under attack, and in the very next move, black can just take on a7, winning the queen, and obviously the game. If you want it to be hyper precise, you can actually take the rook first, and after king takes d4, go queen f2 check and use the skewer. So as you see, quite a few tactical patterns could be used in this particular example. Yes, and this is basically the solution to this puzzle. As you see, nothing really difficult, and I guess we can just proceed to the following example. Okay, so this one is taken from a game played between Larry Christensen and Anatoly Karpov in 1993. And with respect to forks, as you see, it's even possible, as you can expect, considering that I'm bringing this out, I'm showing you this example, you can already expect that there was some sort of a fork used against Karpov. So even world champions or former world champions at this point fail to see forks sometimes, but as you can imagine, these are not some trivial situations, rather a bit more complex ideas. On the other hand, in this case, I think Karpov simply did not have enough board visualization. The level of his board visualization was not well, good enough, and he missed something which is, well, I think this was really unexpected, and this was a nice surprise for Larry Christensen. So please take some time and try to find what Karpov missed here. Alright, okay, so time's up. If you need some time, feel free to pause the video. Basically, what you need to understand in forks is that you don't always have this trivial situation when you push the pawn on e4, the knight is on f6, the bishop on d6, you attack two pieces at the same time. It's just not related to this particular position, it's just a general comment. Sometimes it requires something more, like a good board visualization and understanding that, for instance, the knight on h5 and the bishop on d6 are loose. They are not protected by anything. So if we somehow manage to attack those two pieces at the same time, black is not going to be able to protect everything. And this is what Karpov unexpectedly missed. He didn't see that after queen d1, there is a double attack on the knight and the bishop, and well, this is quite unlucky. Black cannot protect both of those two pieces at the same time, and therefore he loses one. So even at grandmaster level, really high quality players make those mistakes. Okay, I think this is pretty trivial. Again, this is just warm up. In the upcoming exercises, you will probably need to think a little more. And this is another example taken from Grandmaster's practice. This is Brunner against Timman, Jan Timman, playing this position with black. Quite a strange position on the board. White king on f1, I'm not really sure what the king is doing there. Perhaps it actually voluntarily went to f1. I don't really recall this at the moment, but this is not that important. At the same time, the bishop and the rook are hitting pawn on c5, so this is not such a great pawn. It is under attack. It is about to fall. Or is it? Black to move, take your time, make sure you find it, and win the game pretty much immediately. Okay, I assume you've had enough time. This is really simple. I actually gave you a bit of a hint because the king on f1 is really doing, is not really doing well. It's exposed on a6 f1 diagonal, and in fact, if we put the queen on a6, the bishop is also under attack, and black cannot save the bishop since he needs to react with the king. So the game continuation is just queen a6. If king g1, or any other move, queen takes a3, and as far as I can tell, white just resigned here because, well, it's difficult to play without a piece. Obviously, this will still require some technique, some precision from black, but I think at this level, you are expected to win a position like that. Okay, so this example was again taken from Grandmaster's practice, Van der Wiel against Van der Sterren, so two Dutch Grandmasters. This was played in 1997, and in the previous two examples we saw typical case of loose pieces and a bit of visualization, so situations where an unexpected queen move resulted in two pieces attacked from distance. In the first case, this was bishop and the knight, and the second one, this was the bishop and the king under attack. So in both those instances, I guess it must have been a bit unexpected to the players who had to face those ideas over the board. And here again we see a bit of an unexpected solution, at least to a degree. White to move, and white can use the fork to his benefit in a shocking way. So feel free to take as much time as you need and find the right solution here. Right, so you probably don't expect king to perform the attacking function, and in this particular case, this is actually the key. So after king g6, which was the game continuation, white gets to attack both of the rooks at the same time. Quite a peculiar situation, and you don't see that very often, but it does happen. If you have an active king, you might even want to or be able to use it in your attacking endeavors, just to start chasing your opponent's pieces, especially in the endgame. In the opening phase of the game, you obviously want to make sure that your king is safe, but as the number of the pieces decreases, it makes perfect sense to involve the king, because after all, it could be used to attack, to capture pieces, pawns, etc. In this particular case, black is very unlucky because he has two rooks which are under attack. They are very close to each other, but there is a pawn on g7 which separates those two rooks. Black does not have a response to that. He is going to lose one of those. The game saw rook f1, king takes h7, rook takes a1, and after rook takes g7, Van der Sterren lost. He resigned because I think he understood that, well, after the king move, pretty much anywhere, likely to b6, rook takes d6 is going to happen. Just perhaps a bit of a explanation here. After king b6, rook e8, intending rook b8 could be interesting, but if you do that, then you you're going to regret it very soon. After knight f6 there is another fork, so it's important really to recognize those patterns, to see the geometry of the board and avoid such nasty surprises. In any case, after king b6, I think white is very comfortable in taking the pawn on d6, and if that happens, he is expected to convert the material advantage he has. So another pretty simple example, but on the other hand, it could be again as unexpected from black's perspective. I'm pretty sure he didn't even recognize how bad his piece coordination was. He probably knew he has a bit of a worse position, but from worse position to losing immediately there is a long way. In this case, king g6 pretty much wins the game on the spot. And I believe that the previous example was the last one of those pretty simple ones. The following examples are going to be a bit more difficult, involving more than one move, and hopefully they are still going to be easy for you, but you definitely need to consider more factors in the upcoming positions. Those previous ones were generally connected with the fact that they were sort of unexpected by all of the players, and the defending players, the ones who lost the pieces, didn't even recognize the danger. From attacking perspective, it was on the other hand necessary to recognize that there were some loose pieces, unprotected ones, and usually it comes with bad piece coordination where you can find those tactical ideas. Here we are also discussing pretty bad piece coordination, but this time it's probably not that easy to spot the fork, although there is one. So white to move. This is taken from Vasyukov Taimanov, Mark Taimanov, legendary chess player, grandmaster from Soviet Union and Russia. And he didn't find the tactics that is here. So feel free to take some time as usual and come up with the solution. And we're going to see if you got it correct in just a moment. Okay, so basically what needs to be understood here is, again, a common situation where there are two pieces which could be under attack by the knight. So that is a classical fork situation, right? And it is really necessary for you to be able to spot those situations. You will not always be able to make those moves on the board, but if you at least recognize the patterns, you might be able to use this knowledge to construct more complex tactical ideas. In this particular case, if you play knight f6, it looks like nothing really happens because black can just take the knight for free and enjoy the material advantage. But if you start to look at this position more carefully, invest some time in calculating, you probably start to realize that after knight f6, king takes f6, the black king is a little bit vulnerable, and considering that the rook on e4 is also a bit exposed because it's a loose piece again, so we have a pattern. It's not protected by any of the black's pieces. Perhaps it will be possible to create another fork, and this is exactly what happened in the game. Knight f6 first, attacking the queen and the rook, and also please note that before, at this point, black was threatening to take on g4. Thanks to knight f6, this threat is no longer dangerous. And after knight f6, black obviously has a couple of moves to be considered, but the most natural one is obviously just to take on f6 with the king. And if that happens, and this is in fact the game continuation, white just goes queen f3, hitting the rook, giving the check on the king on f6. Once the king retreats, which is pretty much required, white just takes the rook on e4. Moves like rook f4, of course, doesn't really help, and well, white just grabs the exchange and has the, if not decisive advantage, then at least quite a big one. As usual, this will require some technique to be shown by white, but a moment ago white didn't even have the material advantage. Okay, let's move on. This time I would like to show you that forks also exist in the endgames. We have a situation where obviously black has the material advantage, exchange up for a pawn. Black still has some hope because, well, mainly he has this h pawn, and also sometimes in such positions it is possible to build a bit of a fortress, so a situation where it's impossible to break through. On the other hand, with the a pawn and black's king so active, I think it's just technically winning for black. But the black player, and in this case this was Vishy Anand playing against Vasily Ivanchuk with white pieces, Vishy came up with a simple and effective solution, and let's take a look at that. Or actually try to find this on your own. I shouldn't be showing you too many solutions. So black to move and try to figure this out. Right, so it probably doesn't take too much time to understand that there is a bishop on f2 and a pawn on c2 placed on the same rank. Neither of the two is protected, so if we attack both the pawn and the bishop at the same time, this will be a double attack with white being required to do something. So Vishy Anand just played rook d2. Quite a simple move. After rook d2, of course the bishop needs to move, otherwise it's taken and black comfortably wins. So bishop e3, rook takes c2, king b1, and well, black just won a pawn, and you might be wondering, why is this so strong? Why is this so powerful? There will probably other moves that would result in the same position. Perhaps, but on the other hand, this is not really about the pawn. This is about getting access to the white king. And in this case, the fact that black managed to get the access to the white king helps him to create some further threats. So in the game there was rook b2 check, king c1, rook c2 check, king d1, and rook h2, and this is our fork. So it wasn't really about the pawn, this was about creating a situation where there will be a checkmate threat here and here. So unless white does something really, unless he finds some sort of a very strong move, he's going to be checkmated. One way to get to deal with this threat is just to play king c1. Yes, I agree, this avoids the checkmate, but again, technically this is a kindergarten position for a player like Vishy Anand. Rook takes b3 is one move, hitting the pawn, pinning the bishop with the rook, and because of the fact that white's king is so passive, is so badly placed on the back rank, black is still going to have some other tactical ideas at his disposal, but it's not even necessary, because those pawns on a3 and h4, at least one of those will fall, and even the material advantage should suffice. This time I wanted to show you a bit of a more complex position, which is also involving those ideas we saw before. So but this is, I guess, a sort of a situation that is just a common theme for the forks. We didn't really want to show you those trivial examples where you just need to put a piece and find a fork in one or two moves. The examples that we chose are a bit more complex. But if you follow some general principles, you are going to definitely be able to at least see some of the forks that exist in your positions. So in this particular case, this is again Grandmaster's practice game. White to move. Take a look at the entire position. Take a look at the not only at the part of the board where the most of the action takes place, and try to come up with a nice fork. Right, I hope you paused the video. If not, and if you need more time, feel free to do that. What is actually important here is that Black again has a bit of a problem with his piece coordination. So the rook on a5 is in particular in danger. I'm not really sure, I don't really remember what the last move was, but assuming that it was, for example, rook captures a5, so after the exchange of pawns, possibly rook captured on a5, this could have been a decisive mistake. Because if you look at this position, white is able to lure the black rook to the center by means of playing knight takes d4, e takes d4 is rather forced, and then we take on f4. The problem after rook takes f4 is that white just goes queen d2, hitting those two rooks at the same time. So again, pretty much the same pattern. Queen attacking from the distance, one of the pieces, at least one of the pieces is loose, is not protected, is not well coordinated with the rest of the position. So since those rooks don't see each other, they cannot protect each other, and one of them is going to fall. If there was no pawn on d5, of course black would have the option of playing one of the rooks to f5, and then the rooks would be connected. Unfortunately for black, the pawn on d5 is quite a nice asset because it sort of breaks the position into two pieces. What is also perhaps good to mention is that move orders make or may make a difference, because if you start with bishop takes f4 in this particular position, you might get the same result, but at the same time you might get a different result. So after bishop f4, you would need to also consider a move like knight takes b5. In this particular example, white is lucky enough to have moves like, for instance, bishop d2, coming back with a tempo, hitting the rook, maintaining the pressure or the attack on the knight on b5, and as you see, it's impossible to protect both of these two pieces at the same time. On the other hand, just I wanted to make sure just to point out that well, it's good to consider move order as well, because you might run into some sort of in-between moves, and just make sure you don't blunder those. And the last example I wanted to present in this chapter is, well, as follows. White to move, and in a seemingly quiet position where nothing really happens, there is a tactical possibility for white. Make sure you find it. Take as much time as you need, and feel free to pause the video if you feel this is going to help you. Alright, so apparently, even though black seems to have a perfect position, there is a bit of a problem. The bishops on d5 and d6, they are not that great. And in fact, after a move like e4, well, not a move like, a move just e4 is necessary. Black needs to reply bishop e6. If he doesn't do that, perhaps this is the trick that black missed here. If he plays queen g6, there's knight h4, and after this move, the knight attacks on g6, the pawn attacks the bishop, and the queen needs to retreat, and obviously after that happens, black just loses the bishop on d5. Why was queen g6 a move? Because right now e takes d5 is impossible because the pawn is pinned. If the pawn moves, black wins the queen on c2. So what's the problem with just playing bishop e6? Well, if you play bishop e6, everything is fine as long as white just plays e5, because that, of course, is going to be met with bishop takes e5 and nothing really happens. But if we change the move order, and this is another trick, tactical trick I wanted to mention, changing the move order, so in situations where you think something might work, you see a tactical pattern, you see a possibility of attacking two pieces at the same time with a pawn, which is protected by your piece, but for some reason it doesn't work, because here the bishop just controls e5 square. Perhaps it's a good idea to change the move order. So first you actually sacrifice the rook and exchange, in fact, but this is just temporary, because if black takes, which he needs to, you play e5, hitting the rook and the queen. Black needs to react. Possibly he could try bishop f5 just to trick you a little bit, but then you don't take on f6, you wait a little bit, find a good retreat with the queen. Let's just play, for example, queen c1, and after this happens, black needs to escape with the more valuable piece, so the queen, and that leaves the rook on pre. And at the end of the day, white is just up a healthy rook. So this is a bit of a recap regarding fork. I hope you scored 100% in those exercises. There is going to be more of those, some homework or some additional training positions in the PGN. Make sure you calculate those two, and hopefully you're going to be very sharp with forks. But as you probably already know, with chess, everything comes with practice. So just make sure you don't stop there. It's just the very beginning of your tactical journey. Make sure you calculate on a regular basis, solve as many exercises as possible, even beyond what we are giving you in the PGN. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed those positions.